The first thing they noticed was the smell of old wool. Not the champagne misting through crystal flutes. Not the imported orchids cascading down the staircase. Not even the string quartet suspended over the glass balcony like something out of a luxury magazine spread. It was him. An old man standing near the edge of the room, his coat slightly frayed at the cuffs, his shoes polished but worn thin at the sides. He didn't hold a drink. He didn't speak. He simply observed. The penthouse glittered with excess. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a city bleeding gold beneath the night sky. Diamonds flashed at wrists. Laughter rose too loud, too sharp. Every guest had been curated: investors, minor celebrities, politicians who preferred not to be photographed but enjoyed being seen. And then there was him. He stood like a misplaced comma in an expensive sentence. Elara Kane noticed him the way predators notice weakness. She was radiant in ivory silk, the fiancée-to-be, the architect of tonight's spectacle. Her smile was camera-trained perfection, but her eyes were restless, always scanning for flaws, threats, anything that might lower the value of her moment. Her gaze landed on the old man again. "Excuse me," she said sweetly to the guests around her, already walking toward him. Up close, she saw the fine lines on his face, the calm in his posture. He met her eyes without flinching. "Can I help you?" she asked, though her tone implied the opposite. "I was invited," he replied softly. A few nearby guests turned. The quartet continued playing, but conversations quieted. "Invited?" Elara let out a short laugh. "By whom?" He did not answer immediately. He studied her face, not with offense, not with fear. With recognition. That unsettled her. "You must be confused," she continued, voice now edged with steel. "This is a private engagement celebration." "I'm aware." The simplicity of it irritated her more than an argument would have. She glanced at security near the elevators. "I think this gentleman wandered in. Probably thought there was free champagne." A ripple of polite laughter followed. The old man remained still. "I don't drink," he said calmly. "Oh," she replied, mock concern widening her eyes. "Then you definitely shouldn't be here." Two guards approached. One gently took his arm. He did not resist. "Please escort him out," Elara said loudly enough for the room to hear. "And make sure he doesn't wander back in." This time the laughter wasn't polite. As he was guided toward the elevator, a guest muttered, "People have no shame." The old man paused briefly at the doorway. Not in defiance. Not in humiliation. Just to look once more at the room. At Adrian, standing frozen near the bar. At Elara, chin lifted in victory. Then the doors closed. Outside, the city air was cooler. The music above muffled into nothing. The guards released him without apology and returned upstairs. The old man adjusted his coat. Smoothed the frayed cuff. Straightened his spine. From his pocket, he retrieved a simple phone, unremarkable, old-fashioned. He dialed one number. The call connected on the first ring. "Yes," a voice answered. The old man's tone did not change. It did not harden. It did not rise. "Begin the audit." A pause. "Tonight? Tonight." He ended the call. Above him, the penthouse windows glowed like a crown. Inside, laughter continued. But somewhere beneath the marble floors and crystal chandeliers, something had already begun to fracture. And the only question left was this. Who exactly had Elara Kane just thrown out? The black sedan did not rush away from the curb. It moved smoothly, like it had nothing to prove. Inside, the old man closed the door gently behind him. The driver adjusted the mirror, not to check traffic, but to meet his eyes. "Good evening, sir." The voice held quiet respect. The old man removed the worn wool coat. Beneath it was a perfectly cut charcoal suit. Crisp. Immaculate. The kind of tailoring money alone cannot buy, only power. His spine straightened first. Then his presence changed. He was no longer a forgotten guest from a luxury engagement party. He was Viktor Salazar. A name spoken in whispers across ports, boardrooms, and back rooms. The aging but still feared head of a global crime syndicate, a quiet architect of a powerful mafia empire built over 40 years. The car entered a secure underground garage. Steel doors shut behind them. Cameras followed every movement. This was not paranoia. This was survival. Upstairs, in a private office lit by soft amber lamps, Matteo waited. Matteo had been with Viktor for 15 years. Loyal. Precise. The only man allowed to speak freely in his presence. When Viktor stepped in, Matteo stood. "She humiliated you," Matteo said calmly, though his jaw was tight. Viktor placed the old coat over a chair. "She revealed herself." Matteo slid a thin folder across the desk. "We confirmed irregular transfers. 3 shell companies. Money siphoned from our underground network over 6 months. Someone inside is leaking funds." Viktor opened the file but did not look down. "How much?" he asked. "Enough to test us." Silence settled in the room. "Give the order," Matteo said. "We freeze accounts. We bring them in. We send a message." Viktor finally glanced at the paperwork, numbers, routes, coded transactions. Clean. Careful. Intelligent. Then he closed it. Tonight wasn't about money. Matteo frowned. "With respect, sir, someone is stealing from the organization." Viktor walked toward the large window overlooking the city skyline. From here, the same penthouse tower glittered like a jewel. "When power disappears," Viktor said quietly, "truth appears." Matteo watched him carefully. "I went there unnoticed," Viktor continued. "No security. No reputation. No title. And no one defended a stranger." Matteo's expression hardened. "That woman is irrelevant." Viktor shook his head once. "No one is irrelevant." He turned slowly, his eyes sharper now, no trace of the fragile old man left. "If someone in our circle believes I've grown weak," he said, "they will act boldly." Matteo understood then. This was not about stolen funds. This was about loyalty. About character. About who shows respect when there is nothing to gain. Matteo lowered his voice. "Are you saying the leak is connected to tonight?" "I'm saying," Viktor replied evenly, "that betrayal always reveals itself when it feels safe." The room went quiet. Somewhere above, the city pulsed with music and ambition. But inside that office, something colder had begun to move. If tonight wasn't about money, what exactly had Viktor Salazar set in motion? Adrian did not show panic easily, but when his phone vibrated against the polished table, something inside him shifted in a way that no one else could see. The music continued, the guests laughed, and the lights from the crystal chandeliers reflected against the tall glass walls, but Adrian's eyes moved slowly to the message glowing on his screen. It was short. Too short. 3 words that felt heavier than the gold ring in his pocket. "The old man is Viktor Salazar." For a second, his breath stopped. He kept his face still, because years of training in power circles, high society, and quiet business negotiations had taught him that survival often depends on what you do not show. He slowly locked his phone and placed it face down, as if it were nothing more than another wedding notification. But his mind was already racing through every mistake he had made that night. Across the room, the harmless old man who had been mocked and dismissed stood near the exit, his back slightly bent, his expression unreadable. But now Adrian could see it clearly. That was no ordinary guest. That was Viktor Salazar, the aging but feared syndicate leader, the man whispered about in corporate backrooms and underground networks. The man whose approval could build empires, or destroy them overnight. Adrian felt heat crawl up his neck. If Viktor had attended in disguise, then tonight was not random. It was deliberate. Calculated. A silent loyalty test wrapped in humiliation. And Adrian had failed it publicly. He imagined the consequences spreading like cracks across glass. Investors pulling away. Silent partners turning cold. Accounts frozen. Deals collapsing. His carefully built financial empire could crumble before the wedding flowers even wilted. For a moment, his eyes drifted toward Elara. She was smiling politely, still unaware of the storm forming behind the calm surface. Her future depended on this marriage. His future depended on power. And power depended on perception. If he told her the truth, panic would follow. Questions. Fear. Perhaps even doubt. And doubt was dangerous in moments like this. Doubt made people act too quickly. So Adrian chose silence. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked back toward the guests as if nothing had happened. His voice remained steady. His smile returned. His posture showed confidence, not collapse. Inside, however, he was calculating every move like a chess player staring at a board where the king had suddenly been exposed. Why would Viktor come personally? What had he been watching? And more importantly, what had Adrian revealed without realizing it? Elara approached him gently, sensing a shift she could not name. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. Adrian looked at her, and for a brief second, guilt flickered in his eyes before disappearing behind controlled calm. "I'm fine," he said smoothly. But he wasn't fine. Because if Viktor Salazar had truly seen everything tonight, then Adrian's future was no longer in his own hands. And the question that now haunted him was far more dangerous than public embarrassment. Why had Viktor chosen this night to test them all? The first sign was small enough to ignore. On Monday morning, Adrian sat in his glass office overlooking the city skyline when his chief accountant walked in with a tight expression and a tablet held close to his chest. 2 scheduled bank transfers had not gone through overnight, and the system showed a temporary review notice from the clearing house. It was unusual, but not impossible. Large movements of money sometimes triggered automatic flags in high-level financial transactions, especially when international partners were involved. Adrian nodded calmly, but a cold weight settled in his stomach. By noon, the second sign arrived. One of their most important luxury shipments, a container filled with high-end materials for a new development project, had been held for inspection at the port. The paperwork was correct. The taxes were paid. Yet the cargo was frozen under a vague compliance review. The shipping agent sounded nervous on the phone, speaking in careful words as if someone else might be listening. Adrian did not need to guess. This was not random delay. This was a warning shot. He dismissed his team and stood alone by the window, staring down at the traffic far below. The city moved as if nothing had changed, but he understood the rhythm of power, and this rhythm felt deliberate. A pause. A breath. A reminder. By afternoon, 3 private investors had sent polite emails asking about temporary liquidity concerns and risk exposure. The language was soft, but the message was sharp. Someone had whispered in the right ears. Someone had shifted the air around his name. Viktor. Adrian closed his eyes for a moment. The humiliation at the party had not been the punishment. It had only been the beginning. That evening, he returned to the penthouse where Elara was reviewing wedding designs, her excitement untouched by the invisible storm building around them. She looked up when he entered, her expression bright. "You look tense," she said lightly. "Let me guess. More old money paranoia." He forced a faint smile. 2 transfers stalled today. And a shipment is frozen at port. Elara waved a hand dismissively as she adjusted a diamond bracelet on her wrist. That happens in business. Systems glitch. Regulators get bored. It's not some secret corporate conspiracy. Adrian studied her face carefully, searching for even a trace of doubt, but he found none. She still believed the old man had been nothing more than a foolish guest who wandered into the wrong room. She still believed power was loud and obvious, never quiet and patient. It's coincidence, she continued with a small laugh. You're letting that embarrassing scene get into your head. But Adrian knew better. Power did not shout. It moved quietly, like pressure building beneath the earth before an earthquake splits the ground open. What they were feeling now was only the first tremor, a subtle shift in foundation that most people would ignore. He walked toward the balcony and stared into the dark city again, knowing that somewhere, someone was watching and waiting. The real question was not whether this was a coincidence. The real question was how long it would take before Elara realized that the tremor beneath their feet was about to become an earthquake. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of a clock mounted on the far wall, and the faint hum of the city below the warehouse office where Viktor preferred to meet in private. Viktor no longer wore the worn coat or the tired expression he had used at the engagement party. Tonight he sat straight in a tailored black suit, his silver hair brushed back, his eyes sharp and steady. The disguise was gone. What remained was the man people feared in whispers, the architect of a vast financial empire built on patience, discipline, and absolute loyalty. Across from him stood Matteo, his most trusted shadow for nearly 20 years. Matteo placed a thin folder on the table and opened it carefully, revealing printed records of wire transfers, offshore accounts, and layered shell companies that stretched across borders. His jaw was tight, his voice controlled but filled with restrained anger. It has been happening for months, Matteo said quietly. Small amounts at first. Hidden inside routine investment allocations. Then larger sums moved through secondary channels. Whoever did this understood our system. Viktor did not touch the papers immediately. He simply studied Matteo's face, watching the tension in his shoulders. The evidence was clear. Millions had been redirected through clean paths, washed in legal structures that made the theft almost invisible. Almost. Internal? Viktor asked calmly. Matteo nodded. It has to be. Only someone inside our inner circle would know how to bypass the safeguards without triggering alerts. This is not an outside attack. This is betrayal. The word hung in the air like smoke. Matteo stepped closer, lowering his voice. Give the order. We move fast. We freeze every connected account. We pull them in before they can react. A strong retaliation now will remind everyone who they serve. Viktor finally reached for the folder and flipped through the pages slowly, his expression unreadable. He traced a line of numbers with one finger, following the trail as if he were admiring a piece of art instead of reviewing stolen funds. They have been careful, he said at last. Careful people feel safe. Matteo frowned. Safe enough to steal from you? Viktor leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together. No. Safe enough to believe they will not be caught. There was a difference. Matteo's voice grew sharper. If we wait, the damage spreads. Word travels. Weakness invites more disloyalty. Viktor's eyes lifted slowly, and the calm in them was colder than anger. This is not weakness. He closed the folder with deliberate care. Not yet, Viktor said. Matteo stiffened. You want to wait? I want them comfortable, Viktor replied, his tone steady and almost gentle. I want them confident. I want them to think their secret operation is invisible. When people feel secure, they make mistakes. Matteo studied him for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. He understood Viktor's methods. Patience had built their empire. Precision had protected it. Still, a question lingered in the silence between them. If someone inside their trusted circle had the courage to redirect funds under Viktor's watch, then that person was either very foolish, or very powerful. And the real danger was not the missing money. The real danger was discovering who inside Viktor's own circle was bold enough to betray him. Adrian slipped through the dimly lit hallway of the private club where Viktor had agreed to meet him, careful not to attract attention. Every step echoed softly, but in his mind, the sound was deafening. He had spent the entire weekend replaying the engagement party, the laughter of the guests, and Elara's triumphant expression as she had ordered the old man, Viktor, he now knew, to be thrown out. That humiliation could have destroyed any ordinary man. For Adrian, it was a warning he could not ignore. He entered the small office where Viktor waited, his silhouette calm and imposing against the city light streaming through the window. Viktor sat behind a polished desk, hands folded, eyes sharp and quiet. The weight of his presence pressed down on Adrian before any words were spoken. The rumors were true. The stories whispered in boardrooms, spoken in hushed tones across financial networks, and repeated in Mafia circles did not capture the full gravity of the man in front of him. Viktor Salazar was a living force, a ruler whose patience was as dangerous as his power. Adrian swallowed, straightened his tie, and forced his voice to steady. "Mr. Salazar. I wanted to apologize for the scene at the party. It was disrespectful, and I didn't." Viktor's hand lifted slightly, stopping him. "You understood nothing by being polite," he said softly, almost like a teacher correcting a student. "You are afraid, and you should be. But apology alone does not undo what has been done." Adrian felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had prepared excuses, justifications, anything to show that he could be trusted. But in the eyes of Viktor, nothing counted except truth and character. I thought I could manage it. I didn't want Elara to see that I recognized you." Viktor's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "And yet you are here. Alone. Secretly." He leaned back in his chair, watching Adrian as if weighing the man's life against the truth of his intentions. "You are cautious. Perhaps clever. But caution without understanding is dangerous." Adrian nodded quickly, feeling the pressure of every moment stretch unbearably. I will do whatever you ask. I just want to make things right." Viktor's gaze held him, steady and unyielding. "You weren't the one who insulted me," he said finally, his voice quiet but heavy. "The one who chose cruelty does not know yet what comes." Adrian's stomach turned. Every lesson he had ever learned about risk, loyalty, and deception screamed in his head. He rose to leave, nodding respectfully, but a shadow of unease followed him to the door. Viktor's words echoed in the silence behind him, carrying more threat than any shouted warning could. As he stepped back into the night, Adrian realized that the party, the laughter, and the humiliating moment were not the end of the story, they were merely the beginning. And suddenly, a new question pressed against his mind like a fist: if he was safe for now, was Elara the one whose actions had truly drawn Viktor's attention? The gala was everything the city expected of its elite: crystal chandeliers hanging from vaulted ceilings, the hum of a live orchestra playing classical pieces, and walls lined with portraits of philanthropists and wealthy investors who built fortunes quietly and efficiently. Guests moved gracefully in tailored suits and gowns that glittered under the warm light. Elara moved at the center of it all, her ivory dress pristine, her smile wide, and her eyes scanning for admiration as if it were oxygen. Tonight, she ruled the room. Adrian lingered near the bar, still uneasy, replaying Viktor's words in his mind. "The one who insulted me, does not yet know what comes." He had understood then that their careful social climb could unravel in an instant. But nothing could have prepared him, or anyone else, for what happened next. The main doors opened, and the air shifted. A ripple ran through the crowd. Conversation faltered. Guests turned slowly, their faces polite but tense, some whispering under their breath. Viktor Salazar walked into the room, not disguised. No frayed coat, no false posture. Just Viktor. The sharp lines of his face, the quiet confidence in his stride, and the steady gaze of a man who commanded power without raising his voice. Elara froze mid-step, her wine glass trembling in her hand. Recognition flashed across her features. She had seen him before, of course, his name whispered in boardrooms, in finance circles, in the quiet corners of the Mafia network. But to see him standing before her in the flesh, at a gala she thought she controlled, made her stomach tighten. The laughter and chatter around her suddenly sounded distant, like it belonged to another world. Whispers spread through the room like wildfire. "That's him. Viktor Salazar," someone said softly. A few guests shifted nervously, suddenly conscious of the invisible gravity in the room. The man they had once considered a legend, a story of the underworld whispered among the powerful, now stood among them. Adrian's hand brushed hers lightly, but she barely noticed. Her mind raced. Public humiliation, power, status, tonight, all of it felt fragile, exposed. She had thrown a man out of a party, laughed at his frailty, called him insignificant, and now the most powerful man in the room had arrived without warning. Every whisper carried the weight of her own arrogance, every sideways glance reminded her of her mistake. Viktor's eyes scanned the room slowly, deliberately. They were calm, almost polite, but every person in the room felt the pressure of his attention. When they settled on Elara, her pulse quickened. She straightened, forcing a smile, but it was brittle. Every step she had taken to display wealth and superiority now felt meaningless. Adrian's heart pounded. The room waited. Everyone waited. The question hung in the air, unspoken but heavy: would Viktor strike immediately or wait, letting the world see the reckoning unfold in real time? The faint clink of champagne glasses sounded like gunshots in Elara's mind. Her triumph had evaporated. Respect, she now realized, was a fragile currency, and tonight, she had spent it recklessly. And somewhere beneath the soft orchestra, behind the polite chatter, the most important question lingered, echoing like a warning in her ears: would Viktor expose her, right here, in front of everyone? Elara sat stiffly in the small study Viktor had arranged for privacy, her fingers curled tightly around the stem of her wine glass. The gala had ended hours ago, the city lights outside still burning brightly against the night, but inside this quiet room, the weight of his presence made the air feel heavy. Viktor Salazar stood by the window, his silhouette steady and commanding, the faint reflection of the cityscape stretching across his sharp features. "You have questions," he said softly, turning to her without a hint of anger, only observation. "I can see them in your eyes." Elara straightened her spine and forced a calm smile. "And I suppose you'll answer all of them?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Or are you going to manipulate me like everyone else in this city?" Viktor shook his head. "I am not here to manipulate you," he said. "I am here to tell you the truth about a man you never understood, your father." Her hands froze on the glass. "My father? What could you possibly know about him?" she asked, though a flicker of doubt betrayed her composed expression. "I knew him," Viktor said quietly. "Better than most. He made choices I cannot forget, sacrifices I carry even now. He saved the organization from collapse years ago. He took a fall that should have destroyed him to protect those who relied on him." Elara's breath caught, but she did not allow it to show. Her mind raced, trying to reconcile this with the harsh, distant figure of her father she had grown up remembering. "And what exactly does that have to do with me?" she asked, though her voice was a fraction softer. "He believed in you," Viktor continued, his voice steady, each word deliberate. "Even when the world turned cold, even when he paid the price for others' mistakes, he ensured your path would be clear. He trusted me to watch over it when he could not." Elara's jaw tightened. "So you've been pulling strings all this time," she said, her tone almost a whisper but edged with accusation. "You're telling me all of this now because it suits your plan. That's manipulation." Viktor took a slow step closer, his eyes calm but heavy. "Manipulation is when I hide truth. What I tell you now is fact. He risked everything for you. For your safety. For your future. And tonight, when you humiliated me in front of others, you did not only insult me, you spat on the memory of the man who protected you without asking for recognition. Elara looked away, gripping the glass tighter. The guilt pressed against her chest, but she refused to let it show. She could feel the shift in the room, the quiet authority Viktor radiated, the invisible weight of decisions made years ago, and the fragile thread connecting her to the man she had barely known. "And what else am I not supposed to know?" she asked, almost defiantly, though her voice trembled slightly. Viktor did not answer immediately. He merely observed her, the room silent except for the faint hum of the city. Some truths, he thought, are revealed slowly. Some are discovered only when the person is ready. And the most important truth about her father, the one she had never questioned because she thought she already knew it, remained hidden. Viktor did not flinch when the report arrived. The folder lay on his desk, heavy with transaction records, offshore accounts, and emails spanning months, each one meticulously tracked. His eyes followed the trail of numbers, the carefully coded diversions, and then finally, the signature, Matteo. The man he had trusted above all, the one who had been his shadow for nearly 2 decades, was siphoning funds from the very syndicate they had built together. He did not shout. He did not slam the desk. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. The air in the private office felt colder now, the hum of the city outside insignificant compared to the tension filling the room. Every lesson he had taught Matteo, every trust placed, now felt like a knife pressed against the empire he had spent a lifetime constructing. Matteo appeared moments later, summoned silently. He stepped into the room with his usual calm posture, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes when he saw the folder. "Viktor," he began, voice steady but measured, "I can explain. Everything I did, it was for the organization. To evolve it. To make it stronger." Viktor did not speak immediately. He let the weight of the silence press down on Matteo. "Necessary evolution?" he asked finally, his tone low and deliberate. "You siphon funds, betray every protocol, every safeguard we put in place, and you call it evolution?" Matteo's jaw tightened, but he did not back down. "I saw weakness," he said quietly. "The organization has grown too comfortable. You have grown too comfortable. Decisions are slower now. Risk is minimized, but progress stalls. I moved funds to create opportunity, to push us forward." Viktor's eyes narrowed. "And you believe that gave you the right to steal from the people who trusted you? To gamble with loyalty?" He traced a line of numbers with one finger, as if following a path of betrayal that had led him here. "I act for the greater good," Matteo said. "Sometimes the greater good requires breaking old rules. Sometimes the future demands a stronger hand than what tradition allows." Viktor's gaze fixed on him, cold and unwavering. "I raised you, trained you, trusted you as my own. I allowed you to manage the lifeblood of this organization because I believed in your judgment. And you chose to betray that trust." Matteo's hands twitched slightly, the faintest sign of hesitation. "It was never personal," he said, though even he knew the lie. Viktor stood slowly, the weight of his presence filling the room. Every lesson, every sacrifice he had made, pressed down like a stone on Matteo's chest. "Personal or not," Viktor said quietly, "actions have consequences. Trust, once broken, cannot be repaired with words." Matteo swallowed. He had prepared for confrontation, for negotiation, for threats, but he had not prepared for the calm certainty in Viktor's eyes, the quiet force of a man who had already decided the world's outcome before speaking a single word. The silence stretched, heavy and absolute. And somewhere in the stillness, the question lingered, sharper than any blade: would Viktor punish the man he had once trusted like a son, or would loyalty to the organization demand mercy tempered by reckoning? The morning started quietly, with the city buzzing like any other, but the quiet shattered in Adrian's office before the coffee had even cooled. A convoy of black SUVs pulled up to the glass towers, and uniformed regulators in government badges stormed the lobby. Phones buzzed. Security guards tried to contain the panic, but no one could stop what was coming. Adrian watched from behind the polished oak desk as men in suits with clipboards moved efficiently, seizing files, scanning financial records, and freezing accounts without warning. Elara had just arrived, radiant as always, oblivious to the storm brewing. She greeted Adrian with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Another busy day?" she asked, her tone light, almost careless. Adrian's hand twitched over a folder. His calm mask remained, but his mind raced. Every bank transfer, every shipment freeze, every quiet ripple of doubt he had felt since Viktor's appearance had been a warning, one he could not ignore. Now, regulators were moving in, partnerships were dissolving overnight, and whispers of impropriety were leaking into the media, complete with photos of him, Elara, and the penthouse gala, spinning threads of scandal before anyone could react. Elara's expression shifted as she realized the gravity of what was happening. What is going on?" she asked, her voice rising slightly as her heels clicked on the polished floor. Adrian's voice stayed steady. "Regulators. Investigations. Some partners decided to back out. The media caught wind. Everything is collapsing fast." She stared at him, her mind racing faster than her pulse. You knew this was coming?" Her words trembled with disbelief. "All this time, you knew who he was? You knew it was Viktor Salazar at the party? And you never told me?" Adrian met her gaze, his eyes guarded. "I didn't say anything because if she knew, she might act. Because if she panicked, she could ruin everything. Because tonight, as always, survival demanded choices no one else could understand." Elara took a step back, shock and fury mixing in her expression. "You let me humiliate him, and then you kept his identity from me?" Her voice rose, the words spilling into the glass office that now felt like a cage. "How could you risk everything? How could you?" "Listen," Adrian said, stepping closer, trying to steady her, though he could feel the weight of his own mistakes pressing down. "I protected you. I protected both of us. If I had told you, if you had reacted the way you normally do, this would have escalated faster. We would have lost more than just partnerships, we could have lost everything." Elara's eyes narrowed, but the fury was tangled now with doubt. "Or, were you protecting yourself?" she whispered, almost to herself. The phone rang. Media outlets, partners, regulators. Notifications flooded screens across the city. The facade of control Adrian had maintained was crumbling, piece by piece. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the silent collapse shaking one of its wealthiest rising couples. Inside, the tension coiled tighter, a web of secrets, lies, and unspoken fears pressing against the room. And in that quiet moment, Elara had to ask herself the question she could not yet answer: was Adrian acting for her safety, or for his own survival? Elara stared at the door as it closed behind Viktor, the soft click echoing louder than any threat could. The room felt emptier than it had in years, stripped of the quiet gravity he always carried. She had expected anger, a demand for apology, or at least a public reckoning, but instead, there was only absence. The air seemed thinner, the light harsher, exposing every line of doubt that had crept into her posture. "You think you built all this yourself?" Viktor's calm voice echoed in her mind, though he had spoken quietly, almost kindly, minutes ago. "Every scholarship, every mentor, every step of education that allowed you to climb, to command attention, to shape your influence. I provided the opportunities." Elara's pulse skipped. Her chest tightened as if someone had pressed against it. You funded me?" "All those years?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Pride, her constant armor, trembled at the edges. Why never tell me?" Viktor's expression had been unreadable when he said it. No accusation. No scolding. Only a simple fact: truth. Because you were meant to grow strong on your own. You were meant to believe in your independence, to learn to navigate this world. But strength without gratitude can blind a person. Her mind flashed through years of achievement, awards, recognition, her carefully built status, the social circles she had conquered. Every moment she had believed was proof of her own talent now felt tinged with uncertainty. The man she had publicly humiliated, laughed at, and dismissed as weak had quietly shaped the foundation of her success. She wanted to speak, to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. There was no venom in his revelation. There was no pressure. Just the realization that everything she had built on pride had been quietly supported by the very man she had disgraced. And now, she finally asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger, awe, and fear. Viktor's eyes, steady and distant, met hers one last time. "Now, I withdraw my protection," he said simply. "I will not intervene in your life, your choices, or the consequences of your actions. You are free to continue, but you do so alone." The meaning sank in slowly. He wasn't threatening her. He wasn't punishing her outright. He was removing the invisible shield that had guided her through every precarious step of high society, every business negotiation, every carefully measured alliance. Without it, her world, built on borrowed power, was suddenly fragile. Elara felt the weight of it all pressed down. Every enemy who had hidden in plain sight, every competitor, every whispering investor, every unseen rival, now had room to move. The foundation she had taken pride in was no longer reinforced. She realized, with a sinking dread, that power without support can collapse silently, like sand slipping through fingers. Her confidence, her control, her social empire, all of it rested on a quiet, unseen force she had disrespected. And for the first time, she wondered what happens to someone who built status on borrowed power, and what it feels like when the support quietly disappears. The penthouse was quiet. Too quiet. The echoes of laughter, clinking glasses, and whispered congratulations that had once filled the space were gone, leaving only the faint hum of the city far below. Elara stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her reflection staring back at her like a stranger. The city lights shimmered, but they offered no comfort. She felt exposed, stripped of the invisible scaffolding she had taken for granted, forced to confront a truth she had ignored for far too long. Adrian's offices had been raided. Regulators froze assets. Legal threats hung over him like storm clouds, and key investors abandoned their partnerships almost overnight. His charm, connections, and careful negotiations could not withstand the weight of the unraveling empire. He moved cautiously, trying to contain the collapse, but the tide was relentless. Every decision he had made to protect himself now failed to shield him or anyone around him. Matteo was gone. Exiled from the organization he had believed he could control, stripped of his authority and privileges, forced into quiet obscurity. His betrayal had been bold, justified in his mind as evolution, but in Viktor's precise reckoning, there was no place for disloyalty. Adrian and Matteo were both casualties in the lessons Elara had never learned. Power is granted only by respect, and respect cannot be borrowed, begged for, or stolen. Elara turned slowly, tracing the sleek lines of her once proud penthouse, the art, the furniture, the awards she had displayed with pride. Everything now felt hollow. She had built a world of elegance, influence, and social power, yet it rested on invisible hands she had scorned. Viktor had shown her that true strength came not from ego, but from the alliances, loyalty, and quiet guidance that underpinned every empire. Without it, everything could crumble. Viktor appeared in the doorway, calm and controlled as ever. He looked at her not with anger, but with the measured weight of experience, a presence that carried both authority and a kind of quiet disappointment. He did not lecture, threaten, or humiliate her. Instead, he offered one final truth, simple yet heavy with meaning. "Respect costs nothing," he said softly, his voice carrying across the empty room. "But its absence can bankrupt a life." Elara felt the words settle in her chest like stones. Every choice, every insult, every act of pride now had consequences she could no longer escape. Viktor turned, walking slowly toward the door. His coat swayed with the motion, silver hair catching the light for a moment before he stepped into the shadows beyond the hall. The weight of the man, the mentor, the silent architect of her rise and fall, lingered long after his steps faded. The door closed. Alone, Elara faced the silence of her empire, stripped of protection, stripped of illusions. The city below continued to move, indifferent to the triumphs and failures of a single penthouse. Lights flickered in distant towers, cars flowed along the avenues, and life carried on, but for her, the lesson remained: power built on arrogance and disrespect is fragile. Reputations, once tarnished, never fully recover. And in the echo of her solitude, Elara understood the true cost of disrespect.